Welcome to this tutorial on how to configure federated OpenID Connect single sign-on between WSO2 API Manager and KeyCloak. For this, I will be using the WSO2 API Manager version 4.10 and KeyCloak version 17. In this tutorial, I will be configuring OIDC login flow for the API Manager Publisher portal. For simplicity, I have already started both API Manager and KeyCloak servers. First, let's take a look at how we can configure the KeyCloak server. Server is up and running. You can use the localhost 8080/auth URL to access the KeyCloak portal and register an admin user. Then we will use the admin credentials to log in to the KeyCloak portal. Once we log in, we can see this particular screen. If you want to take a look at the OIDC related endpoints, you can simply click on the OpenID endpoint configuration and you will see all the configurations related to it. This will be needed when we configure the API Manager 4.10. I am going to use the existing master realm to configure. As the first step, we need to register a new client, and in order to do that, we will navigate to the clients menu, and the list of already available clients will be displayed here. We can click on the Create button to register a new client. Here you can give a name for the client ID and select the protocol as OpenID Connect. So I have already created one called WSO2 API Manager or the WSO2 APIM to save some time. Once you create it, you will be redirected to the following screen. You can give any name here, and some of the important attributes to fill here are the enabled field, the access type, standard flow whether it's enabled or not, implicit flow whether it's enabled or not, direct access grant we need to make it on, and we need to mention the root URL as localhost 9443 common auth, and we need to give the same for the valid direct URIs as well, and also for the admin URL as well. Once you fill in these details, you can save by clicking the Save button. As the next step, let's go to the Credentials tab. Here we need to copy and take note of the secret as we need it when we configure the API Manager to get connected with the KeyCloak. Next, we can navigate to the Roles section to create the required roles. We need to create some meaningful roles apart from the normal user roles in order to federate the KeyCloak users and give access to the API Manager portal, such as the Dev portal and the Publisher portal. To create a new role, you can click on Add Role button and then give the desired name. So here I have already created a few roles like Creator, Publisher and Subscriber to map the roles in the API Manager. As we are done with creating roles, the next step is to map those roles to be included on the ID token so that it can be presented while the OIDC flow is triggered. In order for us to do that, we can go to the Mappers section and click on Add Built-in, and this way we can see the built-in mappers in the KeyCloak server. From here, we need to select the client roles mapper. I have done this already, and that is why it's not visible here. So once you select the client roles, you will see a similar page as this. So some of the attributes to fill here are the client ID. You need to give the client ID which we have created, and the client role prefix, let's leave it empty, and we need to select multi-valued as on, and we need to name the token claim as roles. The claim JSON type should be string, and add to ID token, add to access token, add to user info. These fields need to be true or set to on. Once these are filled, we can click on the save button. Now that we have configured the OIDC configuration, let's create some users to log in to the API Manager via KeyCloak. To do that, let's navigate to the users section, and here I'm going to create a demo user called pub user and fill in some details. Let's go to add user and give the username as pub user. Let's give the email as publisher@kc.com, and let's give the first name as Tom and user as the last name, and we need to enable user enabled to true and email verified to true as well. Once that is done, we can click on the save button. Let's go to the credentials tab and give a password. Since this is a demo, I'm going to disable the temporary password field, and let's give a password here. And click on set password. And now we will navigate to the role mappings so that we can map the roles that we created earlier to this user. Let's select the WSO2 API as the client, and as you can see, it will list down the roles related to that particular client. We will assign creator and publisher to this particular user so that this user can log into the publisher portal. So now we have successfully configured the KeyCloak side of the things for the OIDC SSO flow. Let's take a look at the configuration on the API Manager side. In API Manager 4.1.0, the publisher, admin, and dev portals are configured with OIDC login flow. So there will be service providers created automatically when we access those portals. As the first step here, we need to create an identity provider for KeyCloak. In order to do that, we can go to the management console by going to localhost 9443/carbon and log in as the admin user. Now that we have logged into the API Manager's management console, we will go to the identity provider section and click on add to add a new identity provider. So in order to add a new one, we need to fill in these details. So to save some time, I have already created an identity provider called KeyCloak IDP. Let me go to the edit section and show you the fields. So I have given the identity provider name, display name, description, and also I have given the alias as localhost 9443 or 2/token. Then we need to go to the claim configuration and expand the basic claim configuration section, and we need to select define custom claim dialog. And here we need to configure two claim URIs, namely preferred username and roles. So for preferred username, we will give the or map the claim URI as WSO2 org/claim/displayname, and for roles we will map the claim URI WSO2 org/claims/role. We also need to make sure that for user ID claim URI, we select the preferred username, and for role claim URI, we select the roles. And next, we will go into the role configuration section, and here we need to map the roles between the API Manager and the KeyCloak. So as you can remember, we created a few roles, namely creator, publisher, and subscriber in the KeyCloak identity provider. So we are mapping those roles here to the API Manager's local roles. So for creator, we are mapping the internal creator. For publisher, we are mapping the internal publisher. And for subscriber, we are mapping the internal subscriber. Once that is done, we will move on to the federated authenticator section, and we will select O2 OpenID Connect configuration. Here we need to fill in the details that we gave in the KeyCloak IDP. So as you can remember, we expanded the OpenID Connect configurations in the KeyCloak. So we found this JSON payload there. So from that we need to fill in these details. So we need to give the client ID and the client secret that we already copied in the KeyCloak server. And the other fields such as authorization endpoint URL, token endpoint URL, callback URL, we need to get those details from this particular JSON payload. And we also need to make sure that we select user ID found among claims for this OpenID Connect user ID location field. Once that is done, we will move on to the just-in-time provisioning section, and we will select always provision to user store domain, and we will select provision silently. Based on the use case, you can select either of them, but I am selecting provision silently for now. And then you can click on save or update to add the IDP. Now that we have created the identity provider, we will move to the final step, which is to configure the service provider. Once we have accessed the publisher portal for the first time, the service provider for the publisher portal will get created. If we go to this list view of the service providers section, you can see the service providers getting created for different portals. So we will go to edit for the publisher service provider, and as you can see, the details are given here. And we need to go to the claim configuration, and we need to click on define custom claim dialect and add a claim URI called preferred username that we have already created in the IDP, and then select the WSO2 org/claim/display name as the local claim and check the requested claim checkbox. We also need to make sure that subject claim URI is selected as preferred username. Once that is done, we will move on to the local and outbound authentication configuration, and here we can select the federated authentication and select KeyCloak. Once you do this, when you log into the publisher portal, it will directly redirect to the KeyCloak login page. So what I'll do is I have selected the advanced configuration, and for step 1 I have selected local authenticator as well as the federated authenticator KeyCloak. In this case, what happens is when you go to the publisher portal, it will show both the options. So let me go back. Once you do that, you can select or click on save or update so that the service provider is updated with the relevant details. So as we are done with the final step, next let's try to see how we see the publisher login page. We'll load the publisher portal now. As you can see, both the option which is the local basic auth and the KeyCloak option is visible here. So I will go to this KeyCloak IDP sign in option, and as you can see, it will then redirect you to the KeyCloak login page. So let me log in with the user that I have created in KeyCloak. and click on sign in. As you can see, the publisher user is logged in to the publisher portal. So this particular pub user is a user in the KeyCloak. And if we go to the management console, and let me sign in as an admin user. Since we have selected just-in-time provisioning, if we go to the users list, we can see that pub user has got created in the API Manager as well. That's all I have for this tutorial. So today we have covered how we can configure OIDC single sign-on between WSO2 API Manager and KeyCloak server. In the next tutorial, I will show how we can configure OIDC single sign-on in a multi-tenanted setup with configuring tenant-specific IDPs. Until then, stay tuned and thanks for watching.